Good morning to our listeners here on Long Island's most listened to radio station, Walk 97.5. My name is Dan Leveler, president of New York State's largest independent labor union, Suffolk AME. It's a pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Suffolk Matters, where Suffolk County meets Suffolk County AME. Our first guest this morning is no stranger to Suffolk County's political arena. Rich Schaefer is the Babylon Town Supervisor and Suffolk Democratic Committee Chair. Rich, welcome to Suffolk Matters.
And thanks for having me today, Dan.
It's our pleasure. So let's just jump right in. What do you have for major takeaways on the 2018 midterm elections?
Well, we're still getting over the reverberations from the shock. I think the thing that shocked me most was the turnout. Turnout was probably about 10 to 15% higher than it normally is in a gubernatorial election year. It went from 35% all the way up 52%. I think Suffolk County voters showed up, and it was close to presidential numbers. So that really surprised us about just how engaged people were. And then, of course, the results. We were surprised. We knew that there were going to be a couple of close races, both on the congressional level as well as the state Senate level. Of course, we were very happy about Monica Martinez winning the state Senate. But I was also happy about John Brooks getting reelected. I've worked with John on a governmental level. His district comes into Babylon Town, and I know he represents the western end of our town, and I got to know him, got to see what he's all about, and he really cares about constituents. So everybody thought he was dead man walking. In fact, we would joke about that, but he won comfortably. He won by over 10,000 votes, and I think it says a lot about the effort that he put in. So those are some of the surprises, but most importantly, I think, and a good surprise was the turnout.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I guess in a way, we can thank some of the things that happen on the federal level in just engaging voters, because I think in America we're starting to see people realize, hey, if I don't get out and use my voice, I'm not going to be represented the way I want. I can't rely on my neighbors to go out and do this for me. I've got to get out and have my voice counted. So.
And that's something that you and I preach all the time. Sure. You as AME leader, the leader of the largest union in Suffolk County, public sector union in Suffolk County, and it's constant banging the drum that if you have a concern, if you have an issue, if you want to express yourself, you've got to show up, and it only takes a couple of minutes. And that's why it was just, like I said, pleasantly surprised by that takeaway that we saw close to presidential turnout numbers.
No, it was great. It's definitely great. So let's just talk about your reaction to the Monica Martinez race. You know, that's someone we really believed in strongly. And we did what we could in terms of helping, but that was always kind of a dark horse race.
Absolutely, and going up against someone of Dean Murray's caliber, who's been a state assembly person elected several times from the Brookhaven town area. And so I think really what it came down to was Monica's base coming out of Islip Town and Dean's base coming out of Brookhaven Town. And when you looked at it and you saw, because every time I would speak to whether it be a union leader or a community leader, they would be troubled by the fact that they liked both candidates.
Certainly.
But I think what really tipped it for Monica was the enthusiasm from her legislative district, and that really is something that everyone needs to pay attention to, because she came in there, and when that district, Brentwood, Central Islip, North Bay Shore, when that district has performed in the past, you haven't seen them turn out. When it performed for Monica, it was almost about a love for her, and it shows just how hard she worked. One, she was a teacher and an assistant principal in the Brentwood School District. So we joke she knew a lot of, she was cultivating the voters from an early age to be able to come out and support her. And we had them showing up to volunteer on the campaign.
Yeah, and you know what I've said about Monica, and I've actually said to Monica is, you know, I think words matter, and when you talk about a politician versus an elected representative, I think a politician is something that doesn't very well define her and how she's handled her career. She has been very much so an elected representative. She always has time to talk. She's always engaging her community and finding out what are the issues, how can we help, and how can we, and not just lip service, follow through also. So that was, I think, a win for Suffolk County in general, just especially because of the composition of the Senate changing this year, to know that we have suburban voices up on the Senate, representing our needs. I think that's going to be a big positive.
Big positive. And let me tell you something. The first thing that Monica said to me, or the question she asked me when we spoke after Election Day, the day after or the 2 days after, can I take my files with me? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I'm working on a lot of constituent issues. And I said, you mean like Mrs. D'Amico's heat is out? Or, yeah, I'm working on I want to take them with me. I said, of course you can take them with you. But that was her first question. It wasn't about what color curtains am I going to have or how many staff members I got. It was like those were her children, and she wanted to bring them along. And I said, that really is significant in my mind. I said, that's really nice of you to do that. And she said, no, that's what I'm elected for. And look, she's a first-generation Salvadoran.
Right.
She's an immigrant. She has seen what it's like to live in a country where there's lawlessness and the government working against you. And she and her brother, Tony Martinez, who's the deputy supervisor in Babylon, the character of both of them it shows really clearly they were raised to care about people. That shows from her. And then the other good thing is that she's young.
Yep.
So she's representing the next generation of leadership. Final piece is that she gets the suburbs. And Dan, you hit on that by saying that we've got to have a voice at the table. And that's extremely important because the last time the Democrats took over the state Senate, I was very vocal and very upset about the fact that they went and passed something called the MTA tax where they paid no consideration to Suffolk County residents.
Right.
And really did us dirty, and I spoke out about it. I took a lot of flack for that being the Democratic chair, but I had to speak up for our community here because at the end of the day, what's most important is our community, and you and your members recognize it as well.
Sure. And, New York State, I've said this before, but New York State on the federal level is a donor state. We give more in taxes than we get back. Suffolk County, inside of the state of New York, is a donor county. Mm-hmm. We give more in taxes than we get back, so it is very important to make sure that all our representatives up there are doing everything they can to make sure that Suffolk County gets its fair share because we give a lot in taxes and we need a lot in services.
And the good news about Monica is that she's been on the ground level. So she's been in a school district. She sees exactly what programs are needed. She's been on the county level, and she's worked with your members at whether it's in the Department of Social Services or Health Services or the police department. She knows what types of things they need because she's been out in the trenches working with them.
That's very good. So how do you think, now Monica vacating her seat on the Suffolk County Legislature, how do you think that's going to impact the dynamic of the ledge in Suffolk County?
Big loss. One, because she brought a lot to the table in terms of knowledge and also engagement. And I think with her stepping out, we've got to be very cognizant of who we select. And right now, we as a party have been we've interviewed at least 7 different people who are interested in running. And the way that works is a special election will be held. The legislature will call that. Monica will resign December 31st. She'll be sworn into office as a state senator January 1st. Right. And then the legislature is, I think, scheduled to meet on January 8th, a special meeting to schedule an election for February 26th. So the voters of that district, those communities in, like I said, Brentwood, Central Islip, and North Bay Shore, will go to the polls on February 26th. All of the parties will now select candidates. There'll be no petition process. It'll be done through convention.
Right.
And then those candidates will run. The person elected will serve until the end of the year. And this whole process will take place again during the normal process,
the normal election,
which is over the summer into the November election. That person would have to run again.
Right. So that would be a special election for that district.
Correct.
And there's a couple of sewer referendums coming up also. So voters are going to need to stay engaged to keep their voice heard on these important issues.
Absolutely. In fact, we conducted a meeting the other night at Babylon Town Hall. We had a bunch of residents who were affected in the Babylon Town area to get information about that important project. We're excited about the fact that they're looking to expand the sewer district.
Sure.
It's going to help the environment as well as help the residents and just their quality of life.
Yeah, sewers is something. Obviously, my history. I worked in public works.
You have something to do with sewers?
And I worked in, the engineering division dealing with new sewer construction. But I got to see the impact that had on people's lives. And I'm always excited for the idea that when we can sewer an area, what people don't always immediately realize is, a certain amount of your parcel size, when you have a home and the footprint of your home and what you can do with the property that you have is eaten up by the septic system.
Sure.
And how far that has to be offset from curb lines and neighbor properties and everything else. And when you have a system like a sewer system, that kind of changes the rules in a way and adds immediate value to your property.
Absolutely, and that's
I
that's
think
what
that's
we were
exciting
telling people. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
exciting, and you guys have done a terrific job. Look, Suffolk County suffered because of the scandals of the Southwest Sewer District, which basically there wasn't a generation of politician during that time
Right.
period that wanted to talk about sewers.
Right.
And we lost out on some 25 years of progress
Yeah.
when we should have been talking about them, being able to access grant monies and putting these projects together.
Right.
The fact that we extended the sewer line up a straight path allowed us to redevelop the most economically distressed community. County Executive Balone, when he was supervisor, set up the Wyandanch Rising project.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at that for other areas as well. And then Supervisor Romaine talks about that's going to mean something to the Mastic Shirley area if those voters approve this. And so it's just helping economic development, not only just the property values, but economic development in general. And we owe a lot of debt of gratitude to your members who work hard, who've kept this going over those years to implement this project.
No, these are exciting times in that way. I mean, the concept of public works in the first place was created in the down economy to put people to work, to stimulate the economy. And
FDR.
we haven't, I don't feel that we've completely come out of the last crash.
No, we haven't.
And right.
There have been certain people who've gotten out of the last crash.
Right.
But I think that you would take a survey of your members, and I would say Babylon is a blue-collar, middle-class town. I know I talk to people who I know for 20, 30 years.
Right.
They haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just barely treading water. And so that has not recovered from 08, 09 to now, which is 10 years.
10 years later, yeah. So it's exciting to see government trying to put initiatives in play that benefit the people, benefit the economy, and just all around, I guess, kind of a positive. A lot of times we get into issues in government, and there's some contention, one side or the other. So it's very rare to have something like these sewer projects that are all around perceived as positives, and in implementation will be positive.
And it was great because it was the $400 million that came through the Sandy effort, which is now going to go, because what we want to do is protect our bay and make sure that the shoreline can build up so that it will protect us from the next Sandy.
Sure.
And this was a really innovative, creative way, and I give kudos to the county executive and Pete Scully and those in the administration who've put that together. But I want to thank the people on the ground who are your members who are making it happen, and in a very quick and efficient way.
Yeah. No, it's an important aspect to all of this, and again, I'm looking really I'm looking forward to that vote. I'm looking for voters to be engaged and getting this process off the ground. I think when we see some of these successes, it's going to make sense in more areas in Suffolk County, and that's going to be good for all of Suffolk County.
Well, when they see it done well, they'll be able to buy into it.
Yeah.
And you're our favorite sewer geek.
I'm happy to be that.
You got it.
So let's talk about something a little less pleasant but political. Very recently, the budget working group in Suffolk County got together, and they made, certainly from my perspective, some common sense tweaks to what the budget was being proposed from the county executive's office. It restored some funding and some positions, and overall, I think would have had a good impact on Suffolk County for the following year. In that whole process, the budget working group agreed certain things needed to happen. Now, it was a $3.11 billion budget, and they were proposing to add $150 million or something like. So
Not even.
If you would have just asked someone for $150 million, they'd be like, "That's crazy." But to stack that next to $3.11 billion, I can comfortably say de minimis.
Yes. And what you were going
doable.
And what you were going to get for what was added, was going to bring in the efficiencies and the savings in order to fill some very vital positions.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we had proposed and the working group was considering was there is some staffing issues,
Sure.
and
Major.
there are nurses that are either working on overtime or we have to hire outside agency people at even more money
Which
to
costs you
come in
more.
and cover these shifts. If we had the ability to do the hiring, you would be paying nurses straight time to do the job. So we actually saved money on the budget. We folded money back into the budget rather than asking for a greater spend, and that's why some of the other programs were able to be moved around. But anyway, long story short, the working group comes to a consensus, says here's what we have, and then everybody pours into the room, and the vote deadlocks. And that was a big problem for me. And I'm wondering on your side.
Yeah, it was. Let me step back a sec. One is you and your staff proposed some very common sense ideas in order to make the budget better than it was when it came over from the county executive's office. And that's what the legislature is supposed to do. For the first time in 30 years, the legislature didn't do its job.
Right.
And I blame the 7 Republicans who participated in some way or another in the working group, and I blame a couple of legislators on the Democratic side. I was very concerned with why Sarah Anker and Bill Lindsay said no. When they explained it to me, I understood some of their rationale, but I think at the end of the day, when you participate in the working group, and particularly the Republican side, you should be one of the people championing the working group product.
Right.
And so for the last 3 or 4 years, the Republicans have done this time and time again. They've participated in the working group, and then they have not championed the work product.
Right.
So, and why they're involved in the working group is because it's supposed to be a bipartisan effort.
Right.
And so they've basically said at this point, because it's been, I think, this may be the 4th year where they've done this, that they've participated and then they don't support the product. And I've said, just giving advice as a former county legislator, I served for 5 years there during a very difficult time in the late 80s, early 90s, when we were constantly just talking about who we were laying off as opposed to what we were doing better for the residents. I've said to the Democratic leadership, I've said, well, then don't let them participate. If they're not going to back up what the results are of the working group, then don't participate. Don't be disingenuous. Say that you're not going to support that and move on. Be professional. Don't be playing games with it, because people don't like games. They didn't like games in Washington. They don't like games in Albany, and they certainly don't like games in Hauppauge. Now, as to Anker and Lindsay, I think that they're now working with the county executive's office because they recognize that some things need to be done. And the good news is that the legislature can amend the budget at least 4 times a year under their current law. And so by February, I'm hopeful, at least what the leadership is saying to me, is that a lot of the ideas that you and your members came up with, which, again, were very common sense, practical, efficient ideas, are being looked at now in order to make that budget better and more efficient so that the county can operate and do what it's supposed to do on behalf of the residents of the county.
Sure. And, just for our listeners, I just want to put a finer point on something that you said. When you said that we had people participating, bipartisan participation on the working group, that working group all voted yes.
All voted yes in the working group.
So when you talk about games, that's the game we're talking about. It's not like they sat on the working group and said, there's no way, this can't be done. I object fundamentally. This is wrong for the taxpayers or anything else. No, they said, yes, this is great. We need to do this. Let's move it on. And then they moved it on and said no. Playing.
Well, the worst kind of person is someone who talks out of both sides of their mouth, and they want to be able to. I'm not going to personalize it, but the people who voted yes and then voted no, they want to be able to go to your members and say, no, I supported such and such adding the nurses, or I supported this, and they're being disingenuous. Why don't we just be upfront and honest with everybody? If you're going to want to take a shot at the county executive, then take that shot.
Right.
But stand behind the shot that you take.
Right.
Don't come to the AME holiday party and say I was there for you.
Because you were not.
Because you were not, and you have to explain why you're not there for you, and then you have to figure out how to be there for you if you want the support of AME. And that's because you have an obligation to your membership, and your membership wants people who are going to back them up. If you feel you can't do that, then say it and explain why you can't, or explain how you're going to do that. And that's what I tell all of the elected officials when they ask my advice on things, and I've been an elected official. Don't bull somebody.
Right.
Lay it out and say it. And that's why, even just with the working group, getting back to the Republicans, and I've said this to McCaffrey, and I've said this to Tom Silmy and Flotter. I've said, you guys can't have it both ways. You can't say you're going to participate, vote for it, and then go out and grandstand and vote against it. It's just not a productive way of running the government.
Yeah. And listen, for me, I would be much happier if our demands were completely unreasonable and they said, no, we can't do that, and here's why, and we laid it out on paper, this can't work. But when we hand them cost savings that folds money back into the budget and it gets voted down, that's tough. And I'm gonna let our listeners peek behind the curtain, so to speak. I had a number of conversations with different legislators about this whole thing, and was given a number of different reasons. Well, this reason or that reason or the whole nine. And, my main talking point that I reiterated to all of them is, listen, you promised that you know what we're up against. You feel sympathetic. You know that for years and years and years, things have been done on our back, and you want to be there to help. I'm asking for your help, and you're telling me no because of X, Y, and Z. Basically what you're doing is we've asked you for food, and you gave us promises, and we've been eating promises for years. People, especially those that are elected to office, they need to follow through on their promises. When they go out on the campaign trail and they promise this, that, and the other thing, and then do nothing to deliver, people notice and they react.
And they'll be held accountable.
And those people will be interviewing with us and looking for endorsements this year. And I'm going to want to know when I needed you, and I made it clear that I needed you, and you told me no for what amounted to, from my perspective, party politics. That's not going to be a good enough reason to support you. So.
And the good news is that there are several months left to try and come up with a way to solve some of the issues. And I know that, at least on the Democratic side, I'm not involved in their intimate discussions of this, but I think on the Democratic side, you've got a will to figure out how to make some of those, because again, it only benefits the government. And I saw what you outlined and presented, and it was all rational things. It wasn't any crazy ideas or let's try something new.
I don't like the blue sky.
No, it was all.
I say, what do we need?
It was all basic, to make sure that this government is delivering the services that the residents need.
Yeah. So anyway, I know I get hot about that, and then I end up going off a little bit, but
that's all right. It's called therapy.
Yeah. So, what do you think? We were talking a little bit about, as I broach the subject of us doing our, we interview all people running for elected office that can have an effect on our membership and therefore Suffolk County. And we will be doing that again this year as part of the 2019 races. But, maybe I could just pick your brain for a little bit. What do you see in 2019?
Well, look, it's going to be a very active local year. You've got the county executives race up. This is the last time that County Executive Ballone can run. He's term limited after this race, so I expect him to be running for re-election. And I think you got several Republicans, so I think you're gonna see a very active county executives race. What's interesting, though, is I think on the Republican side, they're a little concerned about the turnout and how the turnout turned out in 2018.
Sure.
They didn't expect to see as large a Democratic turnout show up. And I think that may back off a couple of their contenders. So they may have a little bit of a difficulty coming up with somebody. In terms of the legislature, I think you'll see, obviously, we don't have any term-limited seats, open seats, this cycle, but we do have a number of seats that could go either way.
Sure.
On both sides. And you mentioned Sarah Anker's in a seat up in Rocky Point. She was 55-45 last election, but I expect her to always have a close race because of the demographics.
Sure.
Bill Lindsay's in another district that's a real tough district for us to win, but he and his father have done well there. And I expect to be able to challenge a couple of the Republicans like Steve Flotterin, who's a first-termer, in the town of Islip. I think he's made a couple of missteps that we'll be able to highlight, and we may have Joe McDermott back out, the former mayor of the village of Brightwaters, great guy. He's a union leader from the Iron Workers Union, and he gets it. He knows how to put a budget together, and he knows how to bring common sense to the table. And I'm also looking at, again, the 9th district of being able to hold that, which is the Monica Martinez seat.
Right.
And then our incumbents are all very strong. People like Rob Calarco and Doc Spencer have done well over the years.
Right.
Up in out in Brookhaven and up in Huntington, and Al Krupski and Bridget Fleming. Tom Muraturi, that may be a seat we'll look at as well. He's at the end. He thinks this is the last time he can run, and I know he's had some health issues. I'm not sure if he'll run again or not.
Right.
But if he does, I think we may be able to challenge. We've got a couple of young people who we've picked up in the town of Brookhaven.
Right.
I call them the 20-something, 30-somethings, and they're ready to go to put a challenge to somebody. So, and we've got a seat in Brookhaven, Southern Brookhaven, which I know you've worked well with Rudy Sunderman,
right,
and his staff. But we may go in that district because of him being a first-termer and being able to go at that. We've held it before with Kate Browning.
Yes, and Kate, I mean, that's still someone in that district. You say Kate, everybody knows who Kate is.
Well, I'm hoping she's working with me now in the town of Babylon. She's heading up our code enforcement division. She's doing a terrific job. I'm glad I snagged her.
Yes.
But I've been telling her that she needs to maybe take a look at it and challenge the term limit law and see if she can run again.
Yeah, there is some interesting wording there that could almost imply that you can't.
You take a 2-year break and come back.
Right. So.
And she loved the job, and I think she did it well.
Yeah, and again, the district loved her. So
loved her.
That's all very.
I call her the share of the Suffolk County Legislature.
Yes.
You just have to say one word, Kate, and everyone knows who you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's all. That's all stuff we're looking at as well, and I think residents are. Again, maybe the engagement isn't going to be quite what it was this year, but I think that next year is going to be an engaging year for people, and I think there's going to be issues that are at the forefront. And I like hearing you talk about involving some of the younger voices, because I think that's becoming more and more important.
Critical.
Getting people involved that can translate to those new voters that are coming in. And it's pretty tough for a 20-something to put their value set in front of somebody in their late 50s, because the world has changed so much recently, over the past, say, 20 years. There's a lot of people listening right now that probably didn't have computers when they were very young.
Absolutely.
But this whole generation has grown up around smartphones, computers, instant access to, services, just, anything and everything. And having that next generation of people that understand the way that world works for people and start making steps towards making government work the way the world has worked for those residents there, since they were a child. I think
vital.
That's going to be great.
Vital. And you guys are doing a great service with this show.
We're trying to, yeah. I think it's important for people to understand where we're coming from, and if we don't let people know who we are and what it is we're doing, I like to talk about the general fund and the budget. Getting back to the budget again. The average is $89 a household. Which is a pretty low number.
Very low.
But people need to see and understand for themselves the magnitude. I mean, you've got almost 6,000 employees running off an $89 charge for the year. That is phenomenal, and that's government efficiency, and that's why I always rally against the idea of, listen, we don't want government workers doing it. We want an outside agency. Now, if you have a specialty job that needs to be done once every 50 years and it only takes 6 months, it doesn't make sense to hire someone for 30 years to do it.
You got it.
These common sense things like engineers, there are always going to be projects to be built and things that need to be repaired. And if we're going to spend millions of dollars on outside design when we can spend $100,000 on inside design, I mean, that's the taxpayer savings.
Absolutely.
And, it motivates me.
And that's why we appreciate your leadership.
And I just want to thank you for coming on the show today, taking time out of your busy schedule. Obviously, you've got a lot on your plate that you deal with. I want to thank you on behalf of my members in your district and all the taxpayers in your district for what you do in the town of Babylon, and I know there is immense respect on the Democratic side of things for what you do for the party. So, again, my guest this morning was Rich Schaefer, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
And thanks again for coming on Suffolk Matters, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. We'll be back next week right here on Walk 97.5 FM.